At my father's retirement dinner, he raised his glass and declared, "My true children are the ones who have made me proud." Everyone applauded. Then he looked at me and said, "You may leave." I stood up, but then my husband also rose, and what he did next left everyone utterly speechless. Hello Reddit. My name is Amelia and I'm 34. My father has just retired after nearly 4 decades as a high-level executive at his company. For most, a retirement dinner is a celebration, a moment of reflection on a lifetime of effort and growth. For me, however, it became something far different. A final public rejection that brought years of unspoken tensions to a head. But what happened next even I didn't expect. My father, Richard, was always the kind of man who commanded every room he entered. Tall, stern, impeccably dressed, and terrifying in his expectations. As a child, I constantly strived to meet his impossible standards. He demanded perfection. Flawless grades, a prestigious university, a respectable career, and absolute obedience to his worldview. When I expressed interest in art and writing, he dismissed it as trivial. When I told him I didn't want to go into business, he acted as if I'd committed an act of treason. My 2 younger brothers, Caleb and Evan, however, fit perfectly into his mold. They attended Ivy League universities, joined prestigious financial firms, married women my father approved of, and even named their children after powerful historical figures, something he viewed as a legacy. I did none of that. I married Ryan, my high school sweetheart, who works in construction management. We had no interest in climbing the corporate ladder or attending networking galas. We bought a modest house, adopted 2 rescue dogs, and built a life that was quiet, yet full of love. My father never accepted it. At family gatherings, he'd make passive-aggressive comments about Ryan being working class. He'd use words like content and unambitious to describe our life, always with a false smile. To his credit, Ryan handled it with grace, squeezing my hand under the table or cracking a sarcastic joke to ease the tension. But I knew it weighed on him too. So when the retirement dinner was announced, a formal affair at a country club, strict dress code, with RSVPs handled by my mother's assistant, I had my doubts about attending. But Ryan encouraged me. "It's an important moment," he said. "You'll regret it if you don't go." I knew I still harbored the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, my father might acknowledge me, even just a little, now that he was stepping away from the world that had made him so cold and obsessed with appearances. The venue was exactly as I'd anticipated. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, men in tuxedos discussing stocks and golf, and women comparing designer bags and private school tuitions. Ryan and I arrived punctually, greeted politely but coldly by most of the guests. My mother gave me a hug like one you'd give a stranger on an airplane. She looked radiant, impeccably dressed in navy silk, but her eyes didn't linger on me for long. My brothers were surrounded by friends and colleagues, sharing laughs and anecdotes about how Dad had revolutionized the industry. Dinner was served, toasts were made, and speeches followed. Colleagues and former employees spoke of his leadership, his vision, and his unyielding standards. Then came the main event, my father's speech. He rose, holding his champagne glass with the self-assured elegance of a man who believed the venue was built just for him. He thanked his company, his mentors, even his golf buddies. Then, turning to our family table, he announced, "But most of all, I want to thank the people who made me the man I am today. My true sons, Caleb and Evan, the ones who have made me proud." Everyone applauded. Everyone, that is, except Ryan and me. Then he looked me directly in the eyes. "You may leave," he stated. I don't know how long the silence lasted, but it swallowed the entire room. The applause died mid-clap. A tightness squeezed my throat, but I rose. My legs trembled, yet I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I turned and walked towards the door. Then Ryan also rose. At first, I thought he was simply coming with me, but he turned to my father, and with a calm, clear voice that carried throughout the silent ballroom, he said, "You know what, Richard? You're not losing a daughter. You're losing a mirror." My father frowned, confused. The entire room remained frozen, watching. Ryan continued, his voice steady. "You've spent your life confusing fear with respect, control with love, and performance with worth. You call Caleb and Evan your true children because they follow your script. But Amelia? She had the courage to live authentically, To build a meaningful life on her own terms, not yours. And that terrifies you. The tension in the air was electric. Ryan wasn't shouting, he wasn't emotional. He was simply speaking the truth, clear, powerful, and something no one in that room had ever dared to say to my father. She may not have your approval, he said, putting his arm around me, but she possesses something far more valuable, a heart that isn't empty. You could have heard a pin drop. My mother's wine glass trembled in her hand. Caleb stared at the table. Evan turned visibly pale. Some guests glanced around uncomfortably, unsure whether to applaud or pretend nothing had happened. But no one spoke. Ryan took my hand and we walked out. We didn't run, we didn't look back. In the parking lot, beneath the soft yellow glow of the country club lights, I broke down. Not from sadness, but because for the first time in my life, someone had truly defended me against the man who had spent decades making me feel invisible. And it wasn't just anyone. It was the person who had chosen me. We drove in silence, but it was a comforting silence. My phone vibrated nonstop. Messages from distant relatives, some apologizing, others expressing surprise. My cousin Rachel even texted me saying, "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." But what happened the following morning was entirely unexpected, especially from the person I least expected. The next morning my phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't distant relatives or awkward apologies. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a minute before answering. We hadn't truly spoken in years. Not honestly, anyway. She had always been the buffer, the elegant, soft-spoken diplomat, standing in my father's shadow, deflecting his outbursts with polite smiles and placating remarks like, "That's just how he is." But something in her voice this time was different. It was trembling. "Amelia," she said, "can we talk?" I hesitated. "Why now?" "Because last night, a door opened that I should have walked through a very long time ago. She asked to come to my house, and for the first time in ages I said yes. When she arrived, she looked as though she hadn't slept. Her perfect facade was still in place, makeup, heels matching her handbag, but her face was haggard and her hands trembled. She sank onto my sofa as if it were the first time she'd ever allowed herself to truly relax. "I want to apologize," she began. "I saw what happened last night and I did nothing. Again, just as I've done almost your entire life." I remained silent, letting her speak. "Your father doesn't know how to love anyone who isn't his own reflection. I thought I could maintain peace by pretending, by trying to mold you into someone he would accept. I was wrong. I failed you." That broke something within me, because no matter how much anger I held towards my father, it was my mother's silence that often hurt more deeply. The time she saw me crying in my room after one of his cutting remarks, or when she told me to let it go or not to take it personally, I always wondered if she, too, saw me as the disappointment he claimed I was. "I knew he was cruel to you," she said. She pulled an envelope from her handbag. "He's not going to tell anyone about this yet, but I am," she said. "He's transferring the majority of his assets into a family trust and naming Caleb and Evan as the primary trustees. I was supposed to sign the final version next week." I blinked. "You mean the inheritance?" She nodded. "Yes, the house, the investments, even the overseas retirement properties, everything will go to them. Not equally divided, not shared. You were deliberately written out." I wasn't surprised. It was just a final confirmation of what I already knew. "I came to tell you," she said, "that I am not going to sign." I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw more than just the distant, silent wife. I saw someone fighting to reclaim a part of herself. "That's going to start a war," I said. She nodded. "I know," she replied, her voice firm. "But if I'm going to burn for something, I'd rather burn doing what's right." A few days passed. News spread quickly through the family. Not about the documents, but about what Ryan had said, about what I had endured. To our surprise, long silent aunts and uncles and cousins began to call. One even admitted he'd never liked how my father treated me, but had always stayed silent because that's just how things were. Then came another surprise. Caleb appeared. He arrived alone, without his wife, without his usual arrogance. He stood on our porch looking like a child who had lost his way. "I owe you an apology," he said. I crossed my arms. Why now? Because I saw how it played out all these years. You got the worst of him, and I let it happen because it benefited me. But I never felt good about it. It just seemed easier to ignore. You let him call me a failure to my face, I said. And then you served him another glass of wine. He didn't flinch. I know, and I'm sorry. We sat in a long silence before he added, You know Dad's furious, right? He's furious because Mom told you about the trust. He thinks she's lost her mind. She hasn't, I countered. She's finally finding herself. Caleb nodded slowly. He's threatening to cut her off completely. Divorce, lawyers, everything. I smiled bitterly. Then so be it, I said. But what followed was the final decisive blow. Ryan and I had been considering moving for some time, wanting to get away from the oppressive proximity of that old family network. Now we made it official. We put our house up for sale and used our savings to buy a small, quiet, peaceful lakefront cabin in Vermont, hours away. Then in the midst of packing, I received a letter in the mail. Not a text, not an email, but a physical handwritten letter from my father. Inside, there was a single chilling sentence. You have made your decision, do not return. I placed it gently on the table and poured myself a cup of tea. That night, Ryan and I sat on the back porch, watching the sky shift from golden to deep violet. I never thought it would end like this, I murmured softly. Ryan hugged me tighter. It hasn't ended, he corrected gently. It's just beginning. Finally, you are free. And he was right. I wasn't broken. I hadn't been discarded. I had been reborn. Let the past applaud itself with its dark suits and empty toasts. I had everything I needed right by my side. As the stars twinkled above the silent trees, I understood that something I had chased my entire life had finally lost its power over me. I didn't need my father's approval, his name, or his inheritance to define my worth. I had love, I had peace, and for the first time I had the last word, not with a speech but with a life that spoke for itself. Amen.